All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a 19th century mystery from Leeds that starts out as a suspected poisoning, but believe me, it quickly turns into something way more unusual. This is a story about a trial where the real defendant wasn't a person, but a whole way of life.
So let's start right at the heart of it, with these dramatic final words from Sarah Scholes. On the night of December 13th, 1842, after a big argument, she supposedly drank from a little vial, collapsed, and uttered this final, desperate plea.
So right away, the big question for investigators was this a tragic suicide or was it a cold, calculated murder? But as the case started to unfold, it became really clear that the court was way more interested in judging the morality of the people involved than in actually solving the crime.
To really get a handle on what could have driven Sarah to this point, we've got to look at the home she was living in. It was a deeply unconventional and, frankly, humiliating situation she was trapped in on Meadow Lane.
The household was, well, a real powder keg. You had three people: Sarah, the wife, her husband, Joseph, and his mistress, a prostitute named Margaret Dowie. And in what you can only call an act of incredible cruelty, Joseph had moved Margaret right into the home that he shared with his wife, Sarah.
And the humiliation Sarah went through, it was just relentless. First, she gets kicked out of her own marital bed to make room for Dowie. Then, in this unbelievably cruel twist, she's forced to come back and actually share a bed with her husband's mistress, while Joseph slept in a totally different room. It's really no wonder her neighbors said she was like a woman possessed by her misery.
Now Joseph, he would later try to claim that they all lived amicably, which is just wild. The truth was anything but. Sarah had desperately begged him, turn Margaret out, but he completely ignored her.
Okay, so let's get back to the night she died. As the investigation got going, the evidence that started popping up was anything but straightforward. So a surgeon, Robert Craven, arrives on the scene to find Sarah dying. He immediately noticed that distinct smell of prussic acid on her breath, a really fast-acting and deadly poison. And yeah, a post-mortem later confirmed that's what killed her. At first, everything seemed to be pointing towards suicide. The police found the poison, and it was tucked away inside her own work box with her personal things. It looked like a tragic but pretty open and shut case. But that tidy suicide story? Yeah, it fell apart really fast. Joseph admitted he bought the poison, but his excuse that it was for a dog and he'd already smashed the bottle sounded pretty flimsy. And then came the really damning part. A witness claimed that Margaret Dowie had been planning to marry Joseph as soon as his wife was no longer around. Suddenly, she had a crystal clear motive for murder.
And this, right here, this is where the whole case just pivots. The inquest, which was led by coroner John Blackburn, it just veered completely away from a murder investigation and turned into a public trial of morality.
From the very beginning, the vibe in that court was not about finding facts. It was just filled with open moral outrage. Both the coroner and the jury made it perfectly clear how disgusted they were with Joseph and Margaret's lifestyle.
Get this. When Margaret Dowie gets up on the stand to describe the living situation, the coroner doesn't really ask for details or probe for the truth. Nope. He just explodes in anger, shouting that her testimony was a most disgraceful exhibition.
So it's pretty obvious the coroner saw himself as more than just an investigator of a death. He was basically a guardian of Victorian morality. He publicly chewed out Joseph, reminding him that his wife Sarah had the only moral claim on him. In that moment, the trial wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about Joseph's character. So how does a clash like this, between the letter of the law and just pure moral outrage, how does that even resolve itself? Well, the official verdict tells you everything you need to know. Legally speaking, the jury was totally stumped. They went through all the evidence, and they just had to conclude that there wasn't enough solid proof to say for sure if Sarah took the poison herself or if somebody else gave it to her. And this is the real kicker. The jury wasn't done. Since they couldn't reach a legal conviction, they decided to hand down a powerful moral one instead. They declared that the immoral conduct of Joseph and Margaret was the indirect cause of Sarah's death. And then they demanded that the coroner publicly and severely reprimand them. So while they couldn't go to jail, they were going to be shamed in front of everyone.
And this case just leaves us with this really complex question, doesn't it? In a way, the court did deliver a kind of justice for Sarah Scholes, not by solving her death, but by condemning the behavior that caused her so much pain. It really makes you ask, where is the line between law and morality, and who gets to draw it?